We're recording and we're live.
Okay. Hi everyone, thanks for coming tonight. My name is Melissa Keenan and I am the education chair for the Lake Wisconsin Alliance.
Yes.
Come on in, there's seats. We have a packed house tonight and good reason for it. We have a great presentation tonight. I just wanted to say a couple things about the Lake Wisconsin Alliance. We are a fairly newly formed 501c3 nonprofit organization. Our goal is to advocate for the lake and inform residents of the lake and visitors to the lake about different things, different topics that come up, things that might threaten the lake, things like that. So we have these education seminars every other month. This one unfortunately was rescheduled from January because of the icy weather, but we do have the one that's scheduled for next month already. It's going to be about aquatic invasive species, and that is going to be held at the Lodi Public Library on March 9th and from 6 to 8 p.m. We're going to have someone come in and talk about that and also kind of let you know about different ways that you can keep invasive species out of our waterways. I do have some brochures here for anybody who is interested, anybody who is a member. Thank you for your support. We do ask for memberships, so we have a little flyer here. We also have a website that's called lakewisconsinalliance.org. On there you can find about all of our events, and we also post, if there's a PowerPoint presentation, we do post that on the website so people can see it if they were not able to make it. We're going to hopefully be able to link to this and be able to show people who couldn't make it tonight the presentation as well. So I'll be around after the presentation as well, so if people have questions, feel free to let me know. And I'm actually going to have David introduce our presenter, so thank you.
Well, I'm excited about this. Melissa and I are the education committee for Lake Wisconsin Alliance, and this has been really a fun thing to be a part of, and over the last year or so that I've been a member. So when we heard about the railroad doing some things, I mentioned it to my friend here, Virgil Kasper. And I've known Virgil for a couple of years, and I knew he was interested in the railroad, but I didn't know he had been chair of the Pink Lady Transit Commission. You'll talk about that, right?
Yes, you bet.
Oh, good. Okay.
Part of the railroad.
And he's also one of the top guides at Circus World. So if you're over there taking a tour, Virgil is one of the major guides over there, and is quite knowledgeable in the circus world. So I have been excited about having him come and talk about the railroad trestle. I told him when they repair it that be sure they save some of my lures that I've hung on that railroad trestle trying to catch a bass. So anyway, I hope he'll give us some good things on that. So I'll turn it over to you, Virgil, and you can tell them more about yourself and how you worked with the railroad.
Okay, well, thank you, Dave. And actually, when Dave talked to me about this, he said he wasn't quite sure how many would be here, but he said we'll have a good crowd, and you do have tonight. It's better than what it been last month that I came down. And if I'd known that you were going to tape this, I'd ask for a bigger fee than what I'm getting. But
we can double it, really.
But Dave said he wanted an expert, and you know what an expert is, I'm sure. X stands for the quality unknown, and that's very easily to be seen at that point. And a spurt is nothing but a drip under pressure. So we have the expert here. Why, we'll talk about railroads. What I'm going to do tonight is talk about the timeline of railroads, and we're going to go way back in history a little bit. We're going to do a little education. Then we're going to tell you what's happened in this Sauk County and this area at that particular level. So we'll be given some timelines. I will have a couple of handouts that you can get at that particular point. But when do you think the first railroad was in the United States? What year would you say? Anybody got a guess when you think the first railroad is in the United States?
1820.
1820, do I hear back there?
1792.
1792.
1801.
1860.
Well, actually, they were officially recognized as railroads in 1830. Naturally on the East Coast where it was built, the Baltimore and Ohio had 13 miles of commercial operation. But at that time, we didn't have steam engines, definitely didn't have gas engines. Your railroad operated on tracks, but it was pulled by horses. So just like your canal boats were pulled up and down the streams by horses, so was your railroad cars. So in 1830, when it all started, and by 1835, there was 1,000 miles of tracks in the United States. 1840, 2,800 miles. So you can see how fast it was growing. 1849, 9,000 miles. And by the time we got to 1860, there's 30,000 miles of track. And of course, the Civil War made big usage of the tracks and moving items and the like, and was terribly important at that particular level. One side of the Civil War, after the war, why all the tracks were put to the same gauge. The southern states all had different gauges of what they ran their railroad on. It could have been just a matter of 2 inches or water off, but it meant that when you got to the state line in the south, they had to transload all that stuff off of those cars over to another car, and that was one of the handicaps that the Southern Confederacy had in their moving of military and equipment, is they could not go from section to section, which they did in the northern part of the United States. So Abraham Lincoln was the one that got us to go to the standard gauge of railroad. After the Civil War, about 8 months after the war ended, why they called a halt to railroad transportation for a 24-hour period, and all railroads were put on to the standard gauge that we use today. Anybody know what that standard gauge is? I'm not going to grade you on this, but you might want to know. You can take it back to grade school tomorrow, or not tomorrow. Yeah, tomorrow's Friday.
It was the width of a Roman chariot wheels.
Yes, it's 4 feet 8.5 inches. So I've got a sheet of paper here. If there's enough to go around, it tells you how the railroads, why they got built that way and like. But basically, it's because the roads back in the ancient days were built to handle a chariot, and this is the width of the wheels. All wagons and everything are built at 4 feet 8.5 inches wide, and the horses were able to go down the path and be the beaten path where the chariot wheels were going to go, so you had a smoother roadway because the horse's hoofs were taking a pounding down that path. So that's what we have as a railroad gauge, 4 feet 8.5 inches. So if you want to take a copy of that as you leave, may run out, maybe they can, somebody here can photocopy something they need, but they'll tell you about that. But also today, if you take and watch the spaceships being launched and like, you notice that they are all a standard width also. And this will explain in here why that happens. Because these rocket boosters that they have are built away from where the ship is launched, they have to move them by rail, and in order to move them by rail, they have to be able to go through tunnels and like, so they too have a gauge that they have to go by because of what the railroads are able to handle as they take through tunnels and this type of thing. So it's a very interesting type of situation. Just mentioned, going to a foreign country just briefly, Switzerland just opened up the longest tunnel ever for a railroad, 34.4 miles long, and it connects 2 towns through the mountains, type of thing, so they have a lot better grade level and the like. So tunnels are still being built even today at that particular level. Well, let's get down to Wisconsin in this area. What happened to railroads? 1857. That's when the line from Milwaukee to the Mississippi River was put in. The one that goes down on the south side of the Wisconsin River, starting at Spring Green, that was put in 1857. And that line is still being used and very heavily used yet today. In fact, it still connects the Mississippi River, and they can exchange cars onto the Burlington Northern at the Prairie du Chien. But it enables Milwaukee to ship stuff to the Mississippi or vice versa and make use of barge traffic from that particular level. So there's transloading of two barges at Prairie du Chien, and it comes up and down that particular line. 1859, Chicago Northwestern was organized, and that's important because they originally were the ones that put in the line here at that particular level. So that was in 1857. Then in 1859, they, wait a minute, backed up here. 1870 wanted to go to why the Baraboo line was authorized by the legislators. They had to go to the legislators to get these organized. So in 1870, the legislative bodies authorized the Baraboo Airlines to take and put a railroad through to Baraboo. I'm not sure why it was called an airlines, but it was called the airlines. So the Baraboo Airlines was the ones that got the grant from the legislative body to put this line through. That was sold out then to the Chicago Northwestern in 1871, and they're the ones that actually put in the original line across the Wisconsin River here and from Madison to Baraboo. The first train, commercial train that came up was September 9th of 1871. And at that time, it was dead-ended at Baraboo. So it got to Baraboo, and that was the end of the line. According to the paper records, like there was 10,000 people there. Seems like a lot of people, but by the same token, it was a big event. So it was a very big event for Sauk County with this 1871 situation. And as we go along in the years then, 1873, they made Baraboo the division for the Chicago Northwestern. So they became a railroad town. From 1871 to 73, they kept building on north and eventually were connected up to Sparta because the rail came from both directions. So it was a through track all the way from Madison to Sparta, and then of course to La Crosse and on north to Minneapolis and this type of thing. So by 1873, in Baraboo, they built a 25-stall roundhouse to handle all the engines that would be serviced there, and major yards and the like at that particular level. In 1890, the USA had 163,000 miles of railroad tracks. By 1892, the rails had expanded so in Baraboo that it was their main part of employment. There was 500 employees living in the city of Baraboo alone. 500 employees. And they averaged about $30,000 per month in payroll, which was a big salary at that particular time, $60 apiece. In 1892, there was also, and when I say Baraboo, they will be going right through Merrimac here. In 1892, there were 18 passenger trains went north or south during the day. So it was a very, very busy track at that particular level, between the passenger trains and all the freight and the like. They come to 1896, the traffic was so heavy they decided to build a double track. So this track through here was all double track from Madison up to Sparta, all the ways. But we'll talk about what happened when you came to the bridge at a little later point. But we had double track all the way out through, and there's some days we wish we had double track even now in more areas. Chicago Northwestern kept expanding. 1900 they had 8,300 miles, and in 1902 was the new passenger station that opened in Baraboo. Some of you may know where the old Baraboo Inn is, and just off to the west of that is where that station was built. They had, up to that point, had kind of a frame type of passenger station that they used, but in 1902, because of the number of the trains coming through, and specifically because of a train that was going to be planned and started in 1910, the 400. The 400 train was a train from Minneapolis to Chicago. It made actually only 4 stops on its way. It left Minneapolis, stopped in La Crosse to refuel and the like of water, coal, Baraboo, Janesville, and then into Chicago. It was known as the 400 because it made that trip in 400 minutes. So it was a rather fast train by the time you consider they had to stop and get coal and this type of situation. It's 390 miles total, and they had some areas of the track where they would be up to 90 miles per hour as they traveled between the two towns. And that 90 miles an hour was with steam engines. So 6 hours and 40 minutes from town to town with the 4 stops pulled by steam at that particular aspect. If you are a bicycle trailist, you'll notice that at Reedsburg there is a 400 bicycle trail. That trail got named the 400 in honor of this train that was going from Minneapolis to Chicago. That also gave Baraboo some notoriety for the people that were traveling between the two towns, especially for the performers that were on stage. And that's the reason the Al Ringling Theater became a factor that should be built and could be built and would be important. We'd have these shows that were showing on stage in Chicago, moving to Minneapolis. They'd have a week in between. They'd come to Baraboo, get a little relaxation, and in order to develop a little money, they'd put on a show. So the Al Ringling Theater was a sort of a stopping point for a lot of the shows that were on these two stages. So part of the interesting part of Sauk County's railroad history. 1916, Civil War type area, World War I type area, back up here. World War I, 254,000 miles of track in the United States at that time, and a very important part of the military. And one thing quite interesting to me anyhow, being with the circus as well as with the railroad for these years, the Ringling Brothers were asked to keep their show running during the World War because this was enthusiasm for the people and a place to go. And also, the Army knew that the Ringlings knew how to load and unload a train because they were moving from town to town every day with a 5-ring circus. And so they knew how to handle equipment, get it on the rail cars, 350 horses and all their other equipment, and to get it back off. And so they had a detachment from the U.S. Army traveled with the Ringlings during the World War I for their training to take and learn how to handle this type of equipment. So when they got to the European countries, they could take and move equipment over there very readily. So Baraboo and the Ringling Brothers became a part of the training for World War I at that particular aspect. Well, we did lose the Ringlings. 1918, the winter of 1918, they prepared to leave in 1919. They left Baraboo for the last time and went elsewhere. They'd been in Baraboo 38 years at that time. When they left Baraboo in the spring of 1919, they had 108 rail cars total, and they had a 1.5 mile length to get all the rail cars involved on the roadway. That today is kind of a short train at that level because we're seeing 2 and 2.5 mile trains in the major haul lines at that particular level. But in 1935, that's when we started seeing the passenger train lose out. That's when the 400, last year the 400 ran. Because at that time, Milwaukee Road inaugurated the Hiawatha service from Chicago to Twin Cities and operated through to the north of us here. So we operated quite well, but the steam engine still pulled that train at that time, and they could go up to 120 miles an hour on the tracks that they had with steam. So today, while there still is a line that you can get through, in fact you can get on the Wisconsin Dells that goes from Chicago to the west coast, so you do have that type of operation. Well, what do we do when we get down to our current situation? 1956, the Pink Lady Quarry opened in Rock Springs. I mention that because that's where our rail transportation commission got named after. It was the Pink Lady in Rock Springs, but that was in 1956. But 1956 also was the last steam train that left Baraboo. We had no more steam after 1956. Up to that point, there was a combination of oil and steam. So the Chicago Northwestern operating the line, overall they had 10,000 miles of track in the United States, and that was the peak mileage that they met at that particular level. Getting down to the modern day, 1984 will be where I'll start my modern day. And what happened at that point? Well, in 1984, one evening, sitting at home, minding my own business, all of a sudden, I had a knock on the door, and here was Representative Tommy Thompson. So many of you know Tommy Thompson, our governor, and at that time was our representative for the Sauk County area. And he said, I got to talk to you, Virgil, because he knew I had some interest in what was happening locally. He says, we need to do something about the railroad because the Chicago Northwestern is looking at cutting back their lines and cutting service, and we have a problem of saving the railroad lines. He says, pay attention and I'll keep it posted. Well, that was going pretty good until 1986, and then it got serious because they talked about cutting the lines off at Reedsburg because they had cut the line going north and Sparta back to above Union Center and the like. And so in 1956, we had an ad hoc committee, which I was chairman of, and it happened to get that because I was chairman of the Chamber of Commerce at the time, and they said, well, Virgil, you can do that too. So we started an ad hoc committee in 1986, and the Pink Lady Rail Transit Commission came about 2 years later in 1988, because that is the year that the Chicago Northwestern cut the line at Reedsburg. No service went beyond Reedsburg in 1988. And we knew if they were going to cut the line back, because they were strongly looking at getting back to Rock Springs, if they're going to cut that back, we had to do something quick. We had 90 days when they decided to do that. So we'd better form a railroad commission at that particular level. So we have a 12-member railroad commission that was formed in 1988, and I chaired that for the first 22 years at that particular time. So what happened in 1988? Well, the line was closed north to the Wyeville in 1988. You know, we had 618 cars received in Sauk County. Grand total. The 121 shipped out of the county. 618 in, 121 out, plus the ballast. You probably, some of you in that area remember there was a ballast train every night where the train would come down through taking ballast out to the railroads. But that was a regular thing. And we kid that those ballast trains were so heavy and it takes and moves the track molecules as they went south that during the summertime, especially with the warm tracks, every few weeks we had to cut 3 feet off the track at Chicago because it was getting all the iron ore accumulated down there. So we had to cut the tracks off so it wouldn't buckle up down to Chicago. But the traffic was one way and pretty much as far as weight was concerned. So in 1989, we had maybe twice a week switching on our freight trains. And that's something to remember, thinking of 618 cars and maybe twice a week switching, some weeks none. And we'll get up to where we're at today here very, very shortly. Well, the thing that happened in 1995 was a boost to the Pink Lady Transit Commission in the fact that the Chicago Northwestern sold out their interest in the line from Madison to Reedsburg to the Union Pacific. The reason that was good to us as far as being able to develop and grow is because Union Pacific did not want to operate the line. They just wanted to have the line and get the Pink Lady quarry so they could use that ballast throughout their line. So they immediately made an agreement with Wisconsin and Southern Railroad, which you see the nice red engines go through today and the like. And they leased to the Wisconsin Southern Railroad, and that's when we really were able to start building our business back up into Sauk County. In 2007, we were up to 6,680 cars of freight coming into Sauk County. And when you say coming into Sauk County, that basically is Baraboo and Reedsburg, plus the grain at Rock Springs. Those are the three major areas that you would be at. So that was received and shipped. They switched 5 times a week, sometimes more than 5 times a week. And at that time, and since that time, we have now a crew house at Rock Springs. So a crew can be stationed there. We have a switch engine in Rock Springs. We have what's called a trackmobile in Baraboo. So we can move, even though the engine that's bringing the rails up across through Merrimac here is not in the area. We can move cars and switch almost on demand during the daytime. So it's a very important type of thing at that particular level. Well, what happened in 2007, we did a survey to see how important was it to Sauk County and at that particular level. And with our survey, we found that there was 2,253 employed people using, because of the businesses that were using the railroad for their operation. So that would be your Flambeau's and your plastic firms for practically all purposes. Flambeau's, the printing company, the Seneca can company, and those type of things. But 2,253 employees in the area that were getting their money from that. It amounts to $965,000 a year in property taxes paid by these businesses. So it's big business to have a rail into the area. In 2007, that 38 miles of track from Johnson Street Yards to Reedsburg is 38 miles of track. It was 6% of the total operation of the Wisconsin Southern Railroad, but it was 11% of their revenue. So you can see what type of revenue is developed off of that. 11% of their in excess of 700 miles that they operate on today. So it's very, very important and that we have it. So we had 14 operations in 2012 using the rail business, and we're doing another survey right now that by April, our April meeting, we should have available that will give us another update, because we've had additions to our usage and increased in our usage since the 2012 economic survey. But the 2012 survey indicated that we have $5,743,000 of property tax paid and about $4 million of sales tax generated because of the turn of the money that's earned by the people in the area. So it's economically really, really important. In 2015 was the last thing that we've had on changes. In 2015, at that time, Union Pacific and the state of Wisconsin, along with a lot of our encouragement and working with them, agreed to buy the line from the Union Pacific and put it in with the state rail bank system. So the state owns most of the mileage that the Wisconsin Southern operates on, that 700 miles. The river, down the Wisconsin River to the Mississippi River, and that line is state owned. And so in 2015, we finally came to agreement and bought the line from the Union Pacific, which was a very important thing as far as the Rail Transit Commission is concerned, because we said back when we were organized in 1988, we will not have this thing settled until such time as we get this line into the state ownership type of area. So 20 years later, well, a little more than that, we got the job done, and it's quite important at that particular level. So be aware, though, that the economic survey, and like if you want to get that, you can go to our website. It's under the Sauk County website, and you'll find in there there's a survey of the 2012 and the 2017 will be shown there shortly at that level. But what type of cars, rails are you going through here? We had back in 2006 was the last real check we made. In 2006, car sizes, there was 122,000 40-ton rails, and there wasn't any of those available. No 40 tons operated on the line. That was what they was operating with at that point. That was available through the area. 70-ton cars, 3% of the business. Today, there's none of those in use. Today, we're operating with the $263,000 pound cars, which is basically 110 tons of weight that they carry, or the 286. 70% of it comes in when these 100 tons per car. So that gives you 2.5 to 3 semi-loads per car. So every time you see a rail car, when you're waiting down here at the crossing for it to go by, count the cars, then multiply by 3, and that's the number of semis you don't have to see on the roadway. So it counts up rather rapidly. Our biggest pull that we've had from Madison to Sauk County last summer, we had one pull of 82 cars. So that was 250 semis, roughly all in one pull, that we did not have on our highways, wearing them out and otherwise at that level. So we have the heavy cars, and the heavy cars take heavier rail. Most of our rail poundage is 85 and 90 pound. We have a little 75 pound rail just south of Badger leading down into Sauk Prairie when that was open at that point. Of course, that is no longer part of the line. We cut off out here at the Y just north of the Badger ordinance, and that part has been put into bicycle trail usage. Of course, the trail is being built yet and the like, but that has been retired from railroad use and put into the rails to trails type of use. But today, why we use 90-pound rail. What is a 90-pound rail? If you cut a rail track off 3 foot in length and put it on the scale, that is the weight that it should weigh. So every 3 feet of rail would weigh 90 pounds. Where we're building brand new area and the like, and for the higher speeds, by 115 pounds is the standard today. And the new areas is all welded rail. This rail through here is sectional rail in that particular type of situation. But the new rail is all welded rail. And if you ever have an opportunity to see the welded rail being laid, it's an interesting experience. That comes shipped to you in 1/4 mile long lengths. So you got a lot of rail to handle. But you weld these 1/4 miles together and end up with a nice smooth track. So we aren't going to have a 115 pound rail, and as we do this bridge, it'll be 90 pound at that particular level, because that enables you to get up to 35 miles an hour with your trains and have a very adequate track to be on. When we've had some derailments and whatever, every once in a while they'll cut out a section of track because the line failed. And what happens? We will find that some of this 90-pound track can be as low as 74 pounds in actual weight. That much is wore off over the years. So a lot of track, it's like the roadways, a lot of the tracks need to be redone or whatever. Well, let's move on. We had some water these last few years, and 1993, 2001, and then 2008 was the ones that really did in the railroad as far as the floods of the years are concerned. The 2008 one, it interrupted our service very badly, and we had a tough time getting back. We were closed for 7 weeks, and because of getting back, the earlier floods in 93 and 2001, we were fortunate because we had a way of moving materials from both ends, and because we had some engines stranded over at Rock Springs, and so they could move ballast to us from the north and we could move from the south. But we were closed for 7 weeks in 2001. It added about $250,000 in that 7 weeks to the cost of shipping to the people that were using our rail lines at that particular level. So very, very important. The big damage was in the Devil's Lake area. You know Devil's Lake. We had $1 million worth of damage right in Devil's Lake itself. Of the $2 million of damage, half of it was within Devil's Lake. So we have that taken care of. It took 10,000 yards of riprap and 10,000 yards of ballast to take care of it, and we've been holding our breath at that point because that 2008 took out a lot of trees along the rail banks and the like, which of course left it subject to more erosions on future overflows. But the overflow was from the Devil's Lake itself. And when that overflowed, we had a ballast water going down the river that really took everything out. And working with the DNR and Devil's Lake, we managed to get them to get their siphon that they use in the lake reconfigured so that today they can open up a valve and let the water out. The lake does not have to get to a high level within about a foot of flood stage before it will siphon out good. So they can open that up and they've really controlled the water. So we have a real good control over the water level in Devil's Lake. Just one little side I'd like to mention here. People think Devil's Lake is down in a hole. Actually, Devil's Lake is up on a hill. If you go into the city of Baraboo, and most of you have been at the courthouse, next time you're in the city of Baraboo at the courthouse, look at the clock up on top of the courthouse. The bottom of that clock is the same level as what the water level is in Devil's Lake. So that's level across. So everything below that level inside of Baraboo actually is lower than what the water level of Devil's Lake is. And that has created problems over the years, back in the older days especially, when they, with their steam engines and like, sometimes they had problems getting the train out of Baraboo up to the level to get through Devil's Lake, because that's a 2% grade there, so you're going uphill all the way, and they'd have to put extra engines on once in a while to get up the hill. It's kind of an interesting thought if you're working at that level. Well, let's go on to bridges now. 1889 bridge, setting in Devil's Lake, went through all those floods and did not have a bit of damage on it. We do not build bridges like that today.